Hey everyone, we'll just get started in a few moments, and we're just waiting for the top of the hour, and we'll be with you in just a few moments. Everything good from your side of things, Rob?
Everything seems good.
Awesome.
Let me see.
All right, everybody, we just hit the top of the hour, and we'll get started just to be respectful of our time. My name is Bill Corcoran, and my colleague Rob Long, who we'll get to meet in a few more moments, and he's right there. We'll be leading this parent support session for you today. First off, we appreciate it. We wanted to offer a session during the day and at night outside of some bedtime routines and so forth for you, but no worries. This will be recorded and will be accessible via our YouTube link that you're watching right now if you're here. If not, I know our Catholic Parents Association has been tweeting, sharing, emailing all these sessions. So we'll get started, and this session is for you. If you're tuning in now, congratulations, you made it to the end of a busy, crazy day, and for your child and for you, I'm sure. So again, we appreciate your time, but this is for you. This is for you, the parents and guardians, to make sure that we can best support you as we go into the remote learning transition, depending on the age of your children, maybe for a week, maybe for a bit longer, depending on the panel and the grades they're in. So we'll get started. Again, my name is Bill Corcoran. I'm a teacher in our board in a leadership position. I'm a coordinator of learning technologies, as is Rob. And so we'll get started just so we can get right into what we're here for. We'll give you some context, some background, and then some more information on Google Meet and Hapara. So first of all, as we gather virtually today from all across the Ottawa region, we acknowledge that we in the Ottawa Catholic School Board are located on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Algonquin people. We recognize their long-standing relationship with this land, which remains unceded. And of course, with all the things that are going on in our lives, at work, in our families, we take a moment to pause and ground ourselves and in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of hope, comfort and restore all who suffer in body, mind, or spirit. May they know the power of your healing love and make us willing agents of your compassion. Strengthen us as we share in making people whole. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, so at this point, I already introduced them slightly, but I will pass it over to Rob.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Long, and like Bill said, I'm a coordinator, which means we're teachers first, and we are in leadership roles in the technology department within the OCSB. As you found out today, and we found out just under 2 weeks ago that everybody's going virtual, I just wanted to reflect for us and for everybody that this was a big change for all of us to throw everybody into this. We had no working days. Everybody was away on vacation when this came out. So it was hence why this morning we had meetings with the staff at schools with their principal, just to go over what's going to happen to finish off this week, and hopefully made it on a call this afternoon with your kids on a Google Meet. But as you can see, and probably are experiencing yourself, this has been a scramble for everybody. So as we move forward, just understand that we were thrown at this at the last second, just like you were, and we're trying to make everything work for you. And hence why we're doing the parent sessions and taking your questions. And I see a bunch of them now. And we'll try and get to everything that's on there. A lot of them are similar, and we'll try and cover those. Understand that your teacher is going to be your primary point of contact to help you get through this for right now. And the teacher can access further resources within the system. So that will be your primary point of contact, even for understanding how do I get technology, things just aren't working quite right. But also understand that your teacher right now is in a synchronous mode of teaching. And so when they're in that mode, it's like they're in a classroom. So I understand sometimes people may be frustrated about what's happening right now with their child, but also we ask that you take a step back, respect what's happening with the class too, and try and touch base with the teacher when they're not live and teaching synchronously. and send them a message, send them an email, and just wait for that response when they're not actually live and with a classroom of, maybe 30 students. So if a bunch of things do go wrong with a couple of students, that can just completely disrupt a class for the other 29 or 28 kids that are moving forward. So please be respectful. Just think about that before you reach out. And to help you, you should have received a message. So if we move to the next slide, Bill's got control over those. You can see, and hopefully you got this message. So we have, 45,000 students now all online. And for a lot of our teachers, this will be a new experience. They were thrown into it for a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic, and now they're in it, all week. So we wanted to prepare, and we have other things to prepare with the teachers. And certainly we've done a lot of work to help give them some background here and help them. But also for the parents and students, we provided a bunch of resources that were sent out to you ideally. And you should have seen a list like this already. But just in case, we put it into this presentation. And at the end, there'll be a link to this presentation as well. So you can grab the presentation and go through this if you haven't seen this already. But there's several steps we believe are very important for parents to really know about to really get going with this virtual environment and teaching within it. So we've isolated it down to these 8 things. And there's a bunch of links in here we encourage you to take a look at. But the first one is, and we have several questions around these areas, around accounts and browsers and how does this all work? And Bill's going to dive into those. I'm going to go over this list, but we'll go into each one in more detail. The first thing that we think is important, and I know maybe you're not a lover of Chrome browser, but for the purposes of us working with your student, it really does work best for us. So we just want to make that clear. It's one of the browsers they can log into, and that login goes a long way for them to access the student portal and other areas. And it makes sure when they're accessing their files in their Google Drive and other places, that login of Chrome really will enable your students quite a bit. So even if you're not a lover of Chrome, we would encourage you, because it's a lot easier to support the students in that environment, to consider allowing them to use it for the learning space. If you're on a Chromebook, you'll be in Chrome. If you're on a Mac or PC or a tablet, you may or may not be in Chrome, but Chrome is supported on all those different devices, and we encourage you to download that so that your student can log in. So that takes care of 1 and 2. Bill will show you how to set up profiles and log in and everything as we go through this. Once you're in, it gives you access, and when your student logs in to Chrome or a Chromebook, they will get access to the student portals. You have to be logged in as a student to get access to the student portals. They are restricted. So when you go to your school website, for example, and Bill will show this later, there's a tab at the top that says Student Portal. When you try to click on that, if you're not signed in as a student, you're not going to get there. So if you've tried and failed, that's why. There are 2 portals. One is for kindergarten to grade 6, and the other one is for grade 7 to 12. And we'll review what some of the content on them is as we go through each of these step by step. For parents, one of the key communication tools from the schools is School Messenger. Most parents are signed up for it, but if you haven't been receiving messages, it may be why. So make sure you're signed up, and you can check by clicking the link here. And again, you'll have access to this slide deck after if you haven't seen this list already. It should have come to you in a message already. We have a good list of YouTube videos for you to watch. And so we've put the link to them. They're in the OCSB how-tos. You can even Google that. And we want you to look at the Guardian playlist. There's several playlists, but you can Google OCSB how-to and find all of our videos. And there's a playlist just for parents and guardians. So take a look at that. But we put the link in here as well. Key to doing all of this is getting on a Google Meet and understanding how it is to get there easily. And so we're going to go through and explain that. This is the standard way we want students to get in. So we're going to show you how to do that so that it works for you and it's simple for students and you to get access to. As part of that, this is now your classroom. And there are etiquette or behavior expectations for being in a classroom. Some of that is covered in our Samaritans on the Digital Road, and Bill will talk more about that later as well. The core areas that we place learning content in, including assignments and all the background materials, is called HAPRA or HAPARA. It depends. And it's within HAPRA, there are many things, but there's one space called the workspace. And we're going to walk you through that because that is where most of the work is going to lie. And when the students go into the student portal, they'll have a dashboard access to that will show them everything that their teachers have set up. And then we will be here to support you, one, through this video call, but also we are behind the scenes supporting the teachers. So we ask that you first go to them. Okay, just remember that that's the number one place to go. There's a bunch of questions on there about accounts. And I don't know what my student's account is. I don't know how to log in. Those kinds of things are in the control of your teacher. So you need to email your teacher and get access to those. And there are several questions already in there around those areas. So that's your number one point of contact, is reach out to your teacher. The general format of an account is first name dot last name at ocsbstudent.ca. That's the standard, but it's not the only way. So if you look down there, you can see at the bottom, first name dot last name at ocsbstudent.ca. And then the teacher has control over the ability to change or reset a password as well. So if that password's lost, the teacher can fix that. So definitely reach out to them. And the last point I'm going to make before I turn over to Bill is this does require technology. If you have any type of technology at home, it's pretty useful to do this. We recommend keyboarded technology as the best type of technology. And we encourage Chromebooks, especially flip touch Chromebooks, because we also use Android apps in learning, and all of them are designed with touch interfaces. So we encourage the use of touch interfaces if you're going to look for a device. Tablets can be used. They're not quite as convenient, especially if they don't have a keyboard, because when you have to keyboard, it takes up half the screen. So it's not as awesome an experience. But usually you can get away with using them, especially if you download Chrome browser onto them so that the students can log in. Some of you have devices from schools. So if there's any need or issues with those types of devices, if they're school-based, then you can reach out to the teacher and she has support behind her. If you're using your own device, it is much harder to support. So some of the teachers are able to give you a little bit of support, but it is more difficult then. However, if you're used to using a device, we aren't asking for any special things as you go into this learning environment online. Really, it's about Chrome. And if you can get into Chrome and sign in, then you're going to be in a good spot to get access to all the virtual environments we're looking at. You do need the internet. If you're on video calls, a reasonable rate is 10 megabits per second. If you don't know how much you have, then you can do a Google search for speed tests, and that will bring up a tool. You click the button, it tells you what your speed is like. So that 10 megabits per second is per person on simultaneous video calls. So if you're working and your students are on and everybody's doing a video call, it does eat up more and more bandwidth in the house. So just be aware of that. And you may have to stagger some things, and depending on how much access you have. You can get away with a little bit less than that, and it will be okay. But that's kind of what the recommended number is. All right. So, Bill, we'll keep going. We have questions and hopefully answers. So if you go to this, it's a form, and it's at tinyurl.com. And the capitals here are important. So you have to keep those uppercase OCSB, tech questions. And that last part, tech questions, is all in lowercase. So it's tinyurl.com/capital OCSB, and then in lowercase tech questions. This is at the bottom of all our slides as well. So if you, as soon as we switch slides again, you'll see it at the bottom. So please throw your questions in there. And Bill's got the bulk of the slides coming up, and I'll be watching the questions, and we'll be going back and forth a little bit. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Bill, and I'm going to jump on the questions.
Thanks, Rob. And I just know that there was a question from earlier today. We'll be embedding a lot of the questions that your parent community across the city from this morning's sessions, and some of them were about, if I had a phone, could you jump on the Meet? And there are apps, just like Rob mentioned, for tablets. There are Google Meet apps for that, and Android apps and so forth. So that's definitely one thing. We also received feedback that could I make my cursor bigger? So I don't normally function with a cursor that big, but for today it works, and it may work. Maybe I'll keep it because it is handy, but that's one piece there. And of course, we'll go through this as best we can to support you. So Rob did mention the Samaritans on the Digital Road program, and this is a K-12 program that all our community goes through. The students have lessons that they go through each year that sort of stagger or scaffold on each other, so that by the time they hit grade 12, they've definitely gone through these lessons, but they also are spark to conversations that we have as learning throughout the whole year. But there is a site that I will click on, samaritans.ocsb.ca, and that is something you could type into your browser URL or Omnibox at any time, but you don't have to do it now. But I just want to know that that is the URL. And when you come on, I will direct you across the top. It is a bit busy on the screen here, and I'll go over to parents, and I will scroll down to the student use of technology. Now, I'm showing you this a little bit right now because the handy checklist that should have been shared with you through the school community, or will be and will be included on the slide deck afterwards, doesn't cover some of these topics that we typically get on these type of calls. We've done several as part of the virtual program, so we've learned a lot in the fall and from remote learning last spring. And these are just similar to what similar topics in some context to what Rob's already mentioned, like the student accounts. A little bit about the safety and privacy of Google. We always get questions about that. So in a moment, I'll ask Rob to pop in just quickly to talk about it, but it does follow all the policies and is in compliance with all the standards. It does talk about the student portal, and I will be showing you next a little bit about the Chrome profiles, basically keeping things separate. And so this will be a specific video, but it's also in that handy dandy checklist. And then a little bit more about Hapara Workspace and Hapara highlights as we go through, and some information about the access to the restricted mode YouTube accounts as part of their Google platforms as well. So that's in here. And the other thing before I throw it over to Rob, just about the safety and privacy within the Google Suite of Education. This was probably part of your child's experience today, just as when they arrive in a brick and mortar school in September with your child's teacher, they develop sort of some ground rules, some expectations on how class is going to work, how they would get the attention of the teacher, that type of thing, some expectations, some classroom norms, so to speak. In Google Meet, they probably did that today. You know, the teacher went over probably some of those, well, how do I get each other's attention? What does it mean to have a conversation or chat? And you might have seen a document that looks like this. I'm just going to show it. It's a bit small. I'll try to make it a bit bigger on the screen for you. But in September, this should have been sent home in paper copy. And this is the responsible use of technology agreement. There's one for K-6 and one for 7 to 12. And basically, there's been a little bit of an addendum, a little bit of a add-in because of this whole virtual program. And it just includes the expectations surrounding virtual meets as directed from your teacher. And then whether in person or in virtual, it just talks about some of those pieces. So just wanted to know that if you sign this and send it back to your school in September, there's nothing you need to do right now, but we have updated this form to include the virtual environment. And we just wanted to give you a heads up on that in both the K-6 and 7 to 12 component. So Rob, just before we transition back about the student accounts, can you just touch base quickly about the G Suite for Education privacy and security policies?
Yeah. So we do get questions often about using Google and the security and who owns the content and searching on it or scanning through it, the data. So all of the school boards are either Google or Microsoft based, or some boards are both. And we have legal agreements through the Ministry of Education and their lawyers and addendums to Google standard contracts with the school boards in Ontario about the rights of the data in particular and our ability to delete that data permanently, and ownership of that data is clarified to be within the school board's access so that we can remove that data. So all of the school boards are working in the cloud one way or another today, and we have chosen the Google Cloud. And we like the whole environment that Google represents with Chromebooks and Android apps. So we think that works really well. The devices and things are working quite securely. They update easily. They're quite good to manage, and there's quite a set of tools available to work in the education space within the Google environment. So that was why we chose it, and we've been Google for a number of years. So the privacy commissioners and others are quite comfortable with what's been set up for this. And so we are also fairly comfortable with what's been established legally with Google and the contracts we've signed. There are a few questions I'm going to clarify, if you don't mind, Bill.
Sure.
Just it is a lot around accounts still. If it's account based, you're going to have to talk to your teacher, all right? Because they're the ones that can clarify the username for your account. Let's say in North America, a common name might be John Smith. So if there's a few John Smiths in the school board, then one might be John Smith, and the next one might be John Smith 1. So you won't know by default for sure what your student account is, not absolutely, without asking. You can try it and check, and if you already know what it is, you're in good place. But if you've been struggling, then it may be that you can't actually guess it. So go to the teacher, get that information. Again, they also control your passwords. There was another one. How do I get the Meet links? And these were some of the other questions where I don't see any links. So as of today, there should have been a link presented for you this afternoon, and you and your student to get on. In high school, of course, the kids are going to get on themselves. In elementary, parents will often have to help the students. But Bill's going to walk you through where it should be. And I know in a question it says we went to the Google Meet on the student portal and it wasn't there. If that's the case, then you need to reach out to your teacher and say, this is what I did. Did I do this correctly for accessing your Google Meet? Because this was the standard protocol set up. If somebody failed to do that or did it a different way, it could have happened. And again, the point of contact is going to be your teacher to verify that. So do reach out to them if that happened to you today, and just send them an email tonight and find out, what am I doing wrong? All right. All right, Bill, over to you.
Thanks, Robin. I just was going to give a heads up myself that if you're trying to follow along within your child's account or anything like that, as you go and try to mimic the Google Meet icon on the student portal, it will only show today's meets. And if you've passed them all, you might not see anything for today. But I will model that as we just go through in just a few moments. So right here, I did mention we were going to talk about Chrome profiles. And this is specifically important, as Rob mentioned, if you have a PC or a Mac, or you're downloaded a Chrome browser on a tablet and so forth, and you're signing into it to make your user experience or your child's user experience a bit easier, because you'll be able to access a lot of the items on this student portal way simpler without having to sign in each time. And so what do I mean by a Chrome profile and a Chrome browser? Well, Rob mentioned about the Chrome browser, and so it may not be your go-to, and we totally understand that. We're not trying to sway you from your favorite, but we are, in terms of your child's experience, trying to get them to have the easiest experience as possible. And so first would be to download the Chrome browser. And the second one of that sort of 1A and was the download, and 1B is the sign in, is you will notice I just went to google.ca. I opened another tab on my screen. you can see that on the right-hand side, just below the browser where you have the close down, the minimize, and the window pane, you actually have my Google account. And when I click on that, that Google account is only my Google account. We aren't currently signed into the browser. And what tends to happen, and so the moral of the story for this one is going to be about keeping your account and your child's accounts separate. And so a lot of people would log in here, add another account, log in, log out, log in, log out. And sometimes when they're going to try to get into a software, they're not in their proper account. So what I mean by that, and there's a video that will walk through this a lot slower and a lot cleaner that's in the slides that we will be sharing with you. But the key thing up here is there, you can see my icon appears twice. This is being logged in to the Google Chrome browser. And I will show you in a few moments that I actually have two windows open, and one is my work window, and the other one is a student, kind of a fake student account that we're going to model some things off of today. So how I did that was I went in and I added other people, and you can see that I could switch in between these accounts. And what it does is it opens up another Chrome browser, so to speak, or a window at the bottom of your screen. So then I have two. I have two open at the same time, and it keeps the accounts separate. So this is an important piece for us, is keeping accounts separate. So one, download Chrome browser, and two, log into the Google Chrome browser right at the top next to the three dots. That's an important piece of this puzzle right here. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But the key thing is signing in. It could be just your two children. It could be that you are having a device and you're sharing it with your kids, or your kids are swapping devices out between classes. Of course, that's all happening right now. So making sure that people are signed in their proper account so that they can go to the student portals. And so what I did was right now I'm clicking on this icon, and I'm going to click on student 17, and it actually just appeared off screen. So I'm going to drag it in just so you can see kind of what I'm talking about. Now I have a second Google Chrome window open, and therefore I have two profiles, two accounts separate. Rob, I see you've popped on. Is there a question coming in about that?
No, I just want to clarify for folks, if you're on a Chromebook, this won't be relevant because you log into a Chromebook from the beginning screen. If you're on a Mac or a PC, then this is very important if you're sharing the device.
That's right. Yeah. So on the slide that you would have a reference for this where the video is, it does really highlight that this is kind of a PC and Mac based piece, where a Chromebook is the two birds, one stone component. So what you're seeing right now is a student 17, and student 17 is just a fake student that we use, like I said, to model. And this is an example of the K-6 student portal. And here's an example of the 7 to 12 student portal. Typically, what would happen is if they log in, or they log into their Chromebook, or they go into Chrome in their account, the student portal that is respective of their grade would pop up in their browser. So it kind of launches automatically for them. If it doesn't, there are different ways to get there. Typically hitting the home button would bring you there, the home button here, as well as like Rob mentioned, your school website. So I just picked one at random, and this is the Guardian Angels school website. And you can see that if all else fails, you could go to your child's school website, and then they could click on student portal. That is just located at the top there. But typically it does show up for them, and they do have that access as well. In terms of the student portal, Rob, I'm not sure if you wanted to jump in a little bit more on here and just expand, or you think we've covered it based on your questions, just about being logged into Chrome and being able to access a lot of these within the browser, because these are a lot of our core tools. So feel free, if you want to expand on that, to jump in.
Yeah. I mean, Bill and I have talked a lot about using Chrome and then signing into it. And that's that little icon in the top right there. It shows that you're signed into your account. The advantage of doing that is most of these applications that are available on here offer something called single sign-in. And so when you click on them, it picks up that you've signed in and lets your student write in. So that's the advantage of signing into this environment. And that means signing into your Chrome web browser, or being on a Chromebook. Of course, you're signed in if you do that as well. The elementary and secondary portals are similar. The secondary portal has a lot more options on it. So you may not see the bottom. So there you have to scroll on this one because there's a lot more options for secondary. And so that's 7 to 12. And then on the elementary, but all the core Google things and accessible things are at the top. So whether it's going to your calendar or going to access your Meet, it's all going to be on the top line. And then there's going to be content to support the learning of the student that your teacher is going to ask them very likely to access. Things like for math or to support French or to create content with video or other things. It's all going to be on here for them to access. Your teacher may also access other content, but a lot of the core stuff and certainly the stuff that the board is paying for is all going to be on this portal.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And so it's all about kind of making that user experience for your child the simplest, and single sign-on is a big component of that because their OCSB student.ca email acts as that sort of password, that launch, so that they can just click on these icons. So I'm just going to kind of pause there a little bit because we're just ready to we've been answering some questions along the way. So again, keep them coming. That's awesome. So really, we're going to get into the sort of crux of why we're here is Google Meet and Hapara Workspace. And essentially, we know, depending on your child's grade level, we may be looking at coming back to school on the 11th or towards the end of the month. So a lot of these practices are the same. But again, as we emphasized at the beginning of this session, as of before Christmas, 75% of our board wasn't in this learning mode. So there's going to be some getting used to sometimes. And this morning, all our teaching staff were able to get some support as we did our earlier parent session to be able to get those links out. So there's some questions about what it means to get to the Google Meet link. And there are some different ways. Calendar is one of them, but that it gets really messy. So the simplistic way that we've recommended to all teachers and all the instructions that have been going to the students has been to, one, get to the student portal and make sure you're logged in, as we've mentioned in the several ways before, and to click on the Google Meet icon here. I'm going to click on the Google Meet icon, and I've created an event. Awesome. So what it's showing me right now is the child's student meets, Google Meets, I should say, that they have been invited to by their teachers all in one place just for the one day, just for that one calendar day. So they're not seeing tomorrow's Google Meets and they're not seeing the next days and the next days. And so depending on how many meets they might have been invited to, so it might only be one or two, or it could be a lot more depending on their schedule, that they would come in here and they could see just in one place the items that they would need to click on. And you can see that this is currently what we're on. It highlights the sort of time session, but it does not show events from previous day, the ones that are finished. So if something obviously went from 3 or 2 till 3:30, then it would not be showing on this one because the event would be over time-wise. And so then it would disappear. So most likely, if you're in your child's account right now and you're replicating this, you might not see any meetings on this page at the moment because there is none left scheduled for today. But I will go into the Google Calendar option in just a few moments to ensure that people know, or you know as a parent and the child knows that they've been invited for future ones as they occur. So if I click on this icon as a student, it doesn't bring me into the Meet right away. So a couple things have to happen. So first, you're going to see that the Google Meet is loading up. There is the immediate ability to turn the camera off and the microphone if you're going to enter in. But you did see something pop up because we were playing around with it earlier today. So I'm going to turn it back on, the camera. There it is. And there is a background. So one of the great features that Google Meet now has, and people might be familiar with it with Zoom and different other video conferencing platforms, is that at the bottom right here, before you click Join Now, you can change the background. And this is very handy because we're all in our homes, and sometimes we just want to just kind of change it out. And maybe you have a couple of kids working at the kitchen table or in their room, and there's laundry on the bed or something like that. So your child has the ability to change their background. There was the slightly blur and blur background, and I'm using on my current session that is not this one, as a blur your background. But in this case, I chose the beach, but there are different ones that the kids already probably played with today. It does possibly take up a little bit of bandwidth when everybody has it. But generally, it's a nice tool to kind of just remove the background depending on where you are. And in this case, I'm on the beach, and when I return from this call, I do not have to quarantine for 14 days. So it's just a virtual beach. I'm not anywhere else but my office in my house, and you can remove them. And then when your child is ready, they click Join Now. However, there will be a component of not being able to get in because your teacher might have set up and should have set up the entry into the Meet once they are there. And so they may be in a waiting room, so to speak. And once the teacher gets in, then it will let all the kids in according to that time. So if they click Join Now and it says waiting on your teacher, that's most likely what they might see as they transition. If your teacher's already there, they'd already go in and be there. So I'm just going to close out of this Meet, and I will show Google Calendar just for reference. And you can see that it may not look the same when you click on Google Calendar, because right now, currently, it's in a month view. I will switch it to a week view maybe. But it all depends on yourself. You might do day view, but you can see right now, just if you were interested as a parent or as a student, just to make sure that, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm invited to the meets on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and especially the next day, if the teacher hasn't said anything in class, like maybe the teacher will say to your child or message you that they won't send the calendar invites into the morning. So there'll be a lot of different circumstances, but that's going to be on a case by case by class and by school and by teacher, of course. So that's just an example of where you could get, but you can see if there was 5 or 6 meets on here, how could it could get really busy to the eye. And so that's why we do recommend, like we mentioned, Google Meet, and just see what they need to see for that day. And that's what your student needs to get in. And most likely, if they were there today, they were successful, but we wanted to give some context of what we showed for best practice. All right. So I'm just going to pull student 17 out of the way and return to our slide deck. Rob, is there any questions kind of coming at this point as I do that?
There are no new questions, so we should show that access again, just to make sure people know.
Which access can you refer, just to getting into a Meet, you mean?
No, just to go down to the bottom of the screen here, and you can see the tinyurl.com/OCSB tech questions. So it's, if you go to that URL and you have a question, it'll pop up and we will try to answer it. So if you have any other questions, feel free, tinyurl.com/OCSB tech questions. And don't forget the OCSB is in caps.
Perfect. Okay, so the Google Meet icon, this is in there. And here was about the Chrome window and the synchronous meet. So a lot of things we're covering it. So we're kind of, we're moving along nicely. And so the last kind of component before we kind of talk a little bit about that Chrome profile piece a little bit more is Hapara. And we highlighted that in terms of it being a learning tool for your child, and where a lot of information or learning activities will be for your child. And depending, again, on their age level and grade, it will be used in different ways from your teacher's perspective and how we could support. So I'm going to go back to the student portal, and I'm going to reset myself. And looking at this, Hapara is on the right-hand side here, and on the I think if I closed it by accident, the 7 to 12, I think it's on the opposite side. But either way, it's on the top row for you and your child to click there once they get into the student portal. So when I click on the workspace and student dashboard, there's actually 2 components. The student dashboard is what I will land on when I click on it. And it might look a little bit busy because we have a lot of information on here because we use this to test things out. But if your child uses this a couple of times a week, this might be something that, even though we're learning on Google Meet, they might have and could have and should have been working on for since the earlier on in the school year. And again, all dependent on their grade level and age, and what it might, the sort of end goal might be. You can see that it has all the workspaces in order here. And then at the top, you can sort of funnel down by classes. So I'm just going to click on CEC Training 1. So yours would, the child would say kind of the school code, the year, and the subject in there. Not, this is just our sort of classes that we work with. And when I click on it, it does narrow things down for me a little bit. And it didn't look like it narrowed it down much there, but I'm just going to click through it, see different classes have different pieces. But I'm going to reset myself into workspaces and to all my classes. And on the left-hand side, which might be handy depending on how it's being used, how many classes, what subjects from your teacher, there might be actual to-do lists with some times assigned to it, like a due date, so to speak. And so if I click on to-do, I can see that in all of my classes, if I was my parent talking with my child, they could click on that to-do box with you talking with them, and you could see that some of their items here, like something is due on January 22nd. That's helpful for you to say, okay, narrow it down and see what it is that they have to do. But not everything. A lot of things won't have a due date, so it's really about entering the workspace and seeing what that means for your child. So let's go to that workspace. So let's reset. In this case, the instruction would be from your child's teacher, whether on a Google Meet or in some sort of instructions to go to a specific workspace. So in this case, I will have said to this child as a teacher to enter into the virtual parent live stream workspace. That wouldn't make sense a lot for the student, but in this case, that's where I've instructed them to go. And when it loads in, it's going to look different. Again, the great thing about workspace is it can be used in so many different ways. So it is dynamic that way. And how each teacher is going to use it from grade to grade within a school, from school to school, and from across the system it's pretty neat how creative the teachers can be in here. But essentially, you can have up to 4 columns that you might see. And here you see 3. There might be a 4th one here. And if there's nothing in that column, it will kind of disappear, except for if they allowed some items to be added into these 2 columns here. It may not all be named goals. It may be learning goals or some sort of a title that the teacher gives. In here, it says resources, but maybe it might be additional learning resources. Again, it will be titled what the teacher wants to call it. And here's evidence, but some might put in show your learning. So this is typically the column that if your child has a task to do, whether it's read something and maybe put a reflection, or to try to insert a picture or something, how they're feeling, they would do a lot of that in this column right here, because you'll see the word start. And then different ways, there are different sections in here that will be used purposefully. So in this case, I've put a couple examples because I can't put all the examples of what it might look like, because there's just so many, like I said, creative, unique ways that will be used across the system. But I will just show you what it means on a card. And so these are called cards, these rectangles, and sometimes they'll have nice, beautiful headers, and sometimes they'll be colored differently and have little symbols. But the key piece is that usually sometimes they're connected, but they don't have to be. They just you have to listen to the child's teacher's instructions. They will have to. And then in this case, again, if I'm a K-1 parent, a parent of a K-1 student, it's going to be used obviously totally different. So maybe there's some songs in here or something that you might be able to do to help support your child on those asynchronous times. So in here, there's a shape song, so you could play that at a later time. And in here, maybe in grade 2 or 3, they're going on a shape scavenger hunt. So you will notice a couple things. Here's a title. I've creatively called it sample task, but of course there'll be a better title. And the next thing you'll be looking here is I've highlighted the word individual evidence. Basically, there's 2 options when you kind of get into this, is that if I'm going to open or start a learning activity, either I'm going to open it up and it will just be a copy for myself, or I will have some partners, and that will be, like you can see under this green card here, group evidence. So that means if I open up this activity, I actually have partners that I would collaborate on with. What are you opening up? Typically, it would be something in our Google Suite for Education, like a Google Slides or a Google Doc. So I'm going to click on Start. And this is an individual evidence. So this is going to open up for student 17. It's actually making a digital photocopy of it right now. And it will bring you to whatever is linked by the classroom teacher. So sometimes it might be completely empty. And just, you can tell at the top, it's got, it says student 17, but it would say your child's name because it's a copy. It's an individual evidence. And sometimes it has a template. So in this case, the educator has asked the child to maybe draw or write, or if they had the ability to take a picture of something that has 3 sides or 3 points, and to do something in this box. Whether it could just be text of what they found. Same here, and something, a circle. So that's a simple activity. I wasn't making it too long to explain, but I'm going to go back to the workspace because not too often you will have your teacher, and sometimes it does happen when your child needs to kind of indicate to the teacher that they have done that. So let's say your child's teacher has asked them to do this individual sample task, find the shapes, and then submit it so they know that they can go on and give them feedback. They can go on without it being submitted, but sometimes they ask it to be submitted because it kind of locks it into comment-only mode. And so if they click on submit, it will say, do you want to send your work to your teacher? And if that's the case, you would click on yes. And when you click on yes, it's going to turn the assignment or this task, and this is the task right now. And if I just refresh it, next time they go in, it will say that it's now comment only. And if I go in to type on it, I can't change my work, but I can leave comments in the margin if you're familiar with that strategy in a Google Doc. Can this be reverted? Of course it can. You would need, your child would need to contact their teacher or you just to say, can you send it back for editing? In this case, this individual evidence is attributed to this article. Just another example, it says, what was school like 150 years ago? I chose that article because it was pretty unique in this time. You can see that they're in rows. I don't imagine, based on the angle that I see, that they are 6 feet apart in social distancing, social learning. I don't imagine that they're all on Google Meets right now, but well, we could go on and on about the differences. So in that work, I'm going to click it, and maybe this is what the child's teacher wanted to look at. You can see it's opening, but I could say that what I didn't do in that workspace was click on the article, and it's a link to just the article right here. So they could use different tools to read it. They can use read and write if they're familiar with it, collect it, highlight it, that type of thing. And so this is the article. So here is what is different, what is the same, and same components. So a lot of different examples. I gave you an example of a Google Doc and a Google Slide, but there's different things. And sometimes it could be a task that links to something that's kind of outside the Google domain that the teachers put in there for learning. And again, they could submit it. All right, I'm going to pause there, Rob. Is there anything coming in about sort of learning activities and workspace before we transition to our last topic?
There are a few questions about them. So sure. One of the questions was, in HAPRA, are the due dates showing up in a calendar? So no, they're not. It is a feature actually in HAPRA, and we actually turned it off. Too many calendars were being created in student accounts, and they found that somewhat confusing. So, and the HAPRA workspace is a place that we expect students to be in regularly. And when you're in that student dashboard, as Bill was showing, it lists all your dates and everything for you right in front of you. So it's very easy to see that you have things due. If they're overdue, it warns you on all these things right in front of you when you go into that space. So we felt that was a really good interface for students to look at what's up and coming, what they may have missed, and accessing it that way. And it was all consolidated automatically there, so there was no chance of missing anything, which, relying on the calendar, sometimes that happened. So that's why we switched into this mode only. there's another question about marks, and does it show a mark when a task is done? They are not auto marked. So a teacher will go in and mark them, and then the students will get those marks, and the teacher can keep track of all of those and then take them and put them in their consolidated grade book and things like that. So yes, assessment marking is part of the application, and often teachers will do it in there, and so it can be shared.
Yeah, and sometimes people, like, they might put a traditional letter grade or percentage like you might be used to, but a lot of times teachers will have unique ways to communicate that that they are done or they're ready for feedback. So there might be different letter codes, and so a lot of these things would be processes that the students are used to. But yes, if it is submitted and is kind of viewed as final, there is the ability for the teacher to put a kind of letter grade or a familiar marking scheme into that box that would appear to that child in that box up here that you are seeing on screen. Good questions.
There is a question about colors and correlation to types of tasks and things like that. There isn't a built-in correlation, but teachers build it in typically. So typically, yes, teachers will say, okay, these groups of content and assignments are going to be colored red because we're covering one topical area of this unit. And then these ones are going to be green because we're covering kind of a different area. So that is something they will do. The other thing we haven't shown you is how teachers create groups and associate students and do all these other things that HAPRA does. We're not showing that right now, but it is something teachers will, because we can't show you everything in HAPRA. It's really quite a comprehensive tool, but it is something teachers will use it for, and they will group students and assign them tasks as groups. Or if kids need different types of instructional focus, then they may assign a group that way. So there's different things teachers will do within that space.
That's right.
And then the last question that I think we have on here. Oh, and similar to marking tasks is done, how do you keep track of the assigned material and instruction that you've looked at? So if you look back, I don't know if you saw this when Bill did it, but when you go in, it does tell you if you started a task or not. So the whole interface for the student keeps track of all of that. And if you started it, it'll tell you. If you started, it will say ready to submit instead of start, because that means you haven't started it. So you can see on the different cards, the red, green, blue that Bill holds up right now, that they're in different states. So one's already been submitted and it's good to go. A teacher may give it back to the student and say, hey, could you maybe just change this and this and open it up for the student again? That is something a teacher could do and say, hey, maybe that you shouldn't have submitted that yet. And it'll throw it back to the student. It'll change the status. In this green card, you can see it still says start because we haven't done that one yet. In the bottom one, we started, but we haven't submitted. So we're not done. So when we go to submit, it'll say, are you sure you want to submit this? And then it'll go to the actual teacher for submission and say, hey, teacher, somebody submitted some work for you. You should look at it now. And then the teacher can say, I'll either take that as final, or they may feed it back to the student with comments. So there's a whole feedback loop that can go on through this process as well.
And just to elaborate on kind of the uses of workspace without going too far down the hole right now, is some might have a workspace for a whole week that has different subjects built into it. For example, you can see that we kind of have a page break here. It's called different in our speak, but this might be all for math. And you can see if we scroll down, this is another example, but this might be all for science, or there might be a workspace just all for science. Again, it's going to be used in so many different ways. And that's the great part about this tool. And the due dates are on the side here as well. All right. So I think I'm going to jump back to the slide deck for a second. But before I do that, I just want you to kind of notice, I think you've been staring at the screen long enough. But in this case, some of the tabs that are open, so this child has the student portal, workspace was open, the article, the Google Docs, the Meet. So there's lots of stuff open. And I'm just going to slide that out of the way because we will be coming back. There's no test on it or anything, but I just want you to remember that that's something that was there when I talk about it in just 2 moments. So the other place is Google Drive, that some of the information might be, because everything that opens up in Hapara, we always enter in through that workspace, but there are some Google Drive folders that some of the teachers might say, well, go to your Google Drive folder, and in their Google Drive, I'm just going to go to their drive. Well, that's my Google Drive. I'm not in Student 17 anymore. I transitioned and I forgot at this time of night. So in that case, they do have some folders that their classes would be using at that moment in time. We've gone through this dashboard demo and we've come back, and we will go back to the supports, but we do want to talk about highlights for just a second. So that's the key piece, is that this is a tool that is part of Hapara, like Rob mentioned, potato. And it's a tool that we found that, especially if we're working with different students, sometimes it's really long. And this was before even TinyURL. Wouldn't it be great if you could open up a browser for them? If you could just send them that article. And this is even before like we got into a lot of these workspaces. Workspace wasn't around when we first got this. So this was a key piece for us, is how do we get a student to maybe open up an article without having to use a QR code or type in really long URLs. So I'm going to show you something that the teacher uses as a tool in their toolkit to make their teaching experience a bit easier, but most promising is what the student can do with it and make their life easier with a lot of these tools, such as opening up links for them and so forth. So I'm going to show you in terms of us being all virtual right now, and this is where it comes back into the Google Chrome profile piece that I talked about before. I'm going to click on sort of a teacher view for a part of Hapara called Highlights. And what Highlights does, and I'm just going to, as this loads in, I'm going to show a piece at the top where you can share links to the students, to a student or all students. So in virtual, even more promising. But imagine you're in a brick and mortar class, you could share a link for 5 students and it opens up automatically. This is when they're logged into their Google Chrome profile in Google Chrome between the hours of 8 and 4, Monday to Friday. So only in their account, only in the Google Chrome browser. So if you're using your own device, it has nothing to do with devices, only that Google Chrome browser window session. The guided browsing say, okay, here's a couple articles. I want you to stay within this environment, just those 3 tabs, so you don't go wandering into different tabs. You can send a message. You can even pause their screens for a second, just so they kind of have that focus a little bit, because it is tempting when everybody is online, you have that keyboard in front of you to type around. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side as another piece of this is the teacher, as part of this sort of Samaritans on the Digital Road component and the support of that sort of self-regulation, they do have the ability, and this is not the purpose of the tool, but they do have the ability to see the static tabs. And static means it's not live, not like a TV. You can see in this case that these are the tabs that student 17 had open. And you can see that the bolded one here is what that child is currently on in terms of their tab. And that is something that if something ever was of a nature where it was not appropriate to be on there, the teacher could click X and remove that. But typically that's not a strategy that we use, because we've set so many components to our expectations in the class. And then here under current screens, this is the static piece where it's not TV. You can't see the cursor moving. This is my cursor moving, but you can't see their cursor moving in that piece, and that would update every 5 seconds-ish. But so the key component, even if you're in a Chromebook, if you are lending your device out to your child and they go out, they take a break from the table or their meet, and you want to pop on and you're still in their Google Chrome profile, that would be something that those tabs between 8 and 4, Monday to Friday only, would be something that would show up in a static form in this component. So we just wanted to make sure that we were transparent about what the tool is and what it could do. So keeping in mind, the word of the day is Google Chrome, profiles separate. And so if you are taking advantage of that, these components would be the same. And so I think anything you wanted to add about highlights there, Rob?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, they have to be logged into Chrome for highlights to kick in. So that's where, like Bill said, because we get a bunch of questions from parents on this, but as long as you have the students logged into Chrome as their profile, then they're going to be completely self-contained with that environment. And if you're on a shared device, PC or Mac, then just create a new window. And as long as the student's not logged into that window, there's no crossover. And you can just get rid of the student window at the end when they're done, and there'll be no crossover between the two. One of the other questions that came up this morning that we didn't see tonight was, I'm on a Chromebook, but I may not be able to be online all the time. Can I still work? So most of the Google Suite, almost everything we do with the Google Suite will be offline. So as long as your student's gone into HAPRA and started the assignment, because that will be an internet access to get in through HAPRA to kick off the assignment. Once they kick that off and they get a copy of the assignment or whatever it is, then all of that will be offline. So as long as they've jumped into that document once, then they can access it again offline. So most content on a Google Chromebook is actually accessible offline, and we've had that question, so that's something else. The other question we had, and there was a question here too, was about Meet app. And in particular, the question in here was, well, the Meet app we tried to use didn't have things like hand raise. So I did try it this evening just to double check on an Android phone, and hand raise was on there, but I can't swear to an Apple phone. And again, and the Meet app on there, I would think it would be supported. Google's very good about supporting the whole Apple environment, actually. So I would think it would work, but all I can do is say I did try it. It is on the phone that I tried. So I don't know. It should be reasonable to use the Meet app. Certainly I use it all the time. Not that I raise my hand all the time in meetings, but I did check and it was on there. So if you have, let's say for the meeting part, you're going to, use a phone for that Meet part. And just to get the synchronous stuff up and running, because you only have so many devices, then that should work for you and it should be fine.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. And I'm just looking at the time. We're kind of rounding out our time. So we'll speak to the kind of resources. And I know we had this slide up here for when we did the elementary virtual program and virtual academy program. But the key points is that we've alluded to is that there is the OCSB how-to, and that's for the parents and guardians. And we also want to highlight that the partnership with CSPA, we work closely with them in their monthly newsletters and different events throughout the year to support you, the parents, the awesome parent community of the OCSB. And so they have been and will be sharing through their social media and different updates these exact recordings of these live streams. So if you missed something or we went too quickly, because there's a lot of information being thrown out at this time, please review it, and especially the checklist that was also on this slide deck. So we'll show you where that slide deck is, and Rob, I'll throw it to you.
There was another question to extend on a previous question, which was about if I'm in the workspace, they actually got what we talked about if they're doing work. But what if they're just looking at resources and going through the list to see? And actually, I do not believe there's a tracking method within the I've already looked at this resource. It's something we'll take back to HAPRA, because that's not a bad idea, especially, sometimes these get quite large, the workspaces, so it can be confusing if you've already looked at the work or not. So that's a good idea. I am going to take it back to HAPRA the next time we do have regular chats with them about what they're doing on development, and I will take that back because right now that's not there. So sorry, good question, but yeah, it's not there right now.
Absolutely. We do regularly meet with HAPRA, and that's a great suggestion. And sometimes to go along with that, a lot of cards is that if they have been placed into groups, that on the left-hand side, you can kind of click on the different subjects or groups that have been there, and it will kind of pare it down. Anything that is kind of tagged or set up by the teacher in that way can kind of shrink things up to only cards that are that, whether it's math or whether it's a group. So if you have a workspace that your child is in, you can try clicking on if there's more than one sort of option on the left-hand side there for your child once you're in a workspace.
We have another question just about, do I need a code to get into a Google Meet? Now, depending on how a Google Meet is set up, it could be code-based. The way that we've asked teachers to work on this, though, is not to use a code, but to set it up in a calendar, and so that it's scheduled, and then it automatically shows up in their Meet interface for students. That's what all of the learning that we've been giving is around doing it this way, because it's the most secure way to do it. That doesn't mean that every single meet will be done that way. And it is possible, and people can set them up that they require codes. Normally, that would not be the case, but I can't rule it out because it is a possibility. But that isn't the norm. That is not what we're putting forward for teachers to do on a regular basis.
That's right. One of our big takeaways from the remote learning from last spring when we first went into the pandemic is that coherence and simplicity. So the way we showed you with Google Meet is what we're promoting with our staff and what we spent time with professional development with, and then use of workspace. So it's no matter what school across the city you're from, we're hoping that the experience is very similar for you to make it easy all around for our community.
All right, and I don't see any more questions coming in. Again, the tinyurl.com/OCSB Tech questions is up there. If you have one or two last questions, we can take them. And as promised, like Bill said, if you want to walk away with this presentation, there's the URL to get that. So take a picture of it with your camera or write it down real quick or do whatever. And so that you can get that URL if you want to go back to the slide deck and look through it again at your leisure. And we'll leave that up for a couple minutes. If a bunch more questions come in, we'll pop back on. But otherwise, thanks for joining us this evening. I know it's a challenge. I remember a bunch of our teachers have kids in school too, and they're now home teaching every day with kids, and all of us are doing this crazy thing. So just remember, they're doing their best. It is new for them, and just, try and help them out however you can. And again, on behalf of Bill and I, we really appreciate you taking the time. And if you're in elementary, if all goes well this week, you'll be back in school next week, and a couple of weeks for you in high school. So good luck, and thanks again. Reach out to your teacher if you're struggling.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening.
There is a question out there about a hybrid learning platform for Ottawa. I'm not positive what the implication is in that question. I'll take a crack, but I'm not sure what you're implying. So currently in our K-12 environment, we have an e-learning platform with a learning management system that is used across the province called Brightspace by D2L. So that is another platform we use for online learning. And traditionally, we've used that primarily with e-learning courses, which are pure online courses, which are available mostly in 10 to 12. And they often support students who are trying to get access to certain credits that may not be available in the school, or there's conflicts or they're in very high level sport programs where they have to spend time during the day in training. In Ottawa, our encouragement in K-12 in general for brick and mortar / virtual schools is that content be provided within HAPRA so that it's always available whether the students are in or out of the classroom. This has been a model that we've evolved much more heavily since the pandemic has hit, and we've really pushed forward. So that is kind of our model, is to say, use HAPRA as a core, and then whatever hits, whether students in or out of the classroom for whatever reason, they always have access. So in that way, it is kind of a hybrid model. Will virtual schools continue into the future? There's a strong possibility that may happen. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to go back to our old normal. So I think some of the new normal may be things like virtual schools always exist. Not just but more of an opportunity for full online or partial online that includes synchronous, which courses don't always include. So they'd be running daytime. So there are things that I think are going to happen and change as we move forward. And so in that way, we may see some other hybrids coming. So I hope that answers the question. So anyway, we'll see what happens. All right. Well, we will sign off. So everybody have a good night. Take care. Be safe.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Bill.